Hi, welcome to Oseberg Hacks, where I'm going to give you some tips and ideas as to how we think about utilizing data here at Oseberg. More recently, I been asked the question, in Oklahoma, where is it that I would potentially look to buy minerals? And for me personally, if I'm buying minerals, I'm really after MOIC. I'm trying to take a dollar and make it 10. Um, And so I'm looking for areas that are up and coming where there's low risk in development. The problem with stepping out of the core to the core where there's PDP is that it's more risky in terms of the timing of development. Ideally, companies will have some competitive advantage in that they'll have a relationship with an operator or a rig schedule. Um, where those unique relationships don't exist because from my understanding, those are rare. Um, I'm looking at public data, trying to determine, what can information tell me as to what's likely to get developed. So today we're going to take a look at Mewbourne, and I'm particularly interested in what they're doing in Roger Mills in Ellis County, Oklahoma, in the Cherokee. What I'm looking at is a database of all the apps and orders in the Oklahoma Corporation Commission for the state of Oklahoma. And one of the unique things that Oseberg does, unlike a lot of vendors out there, is when we get into a regulatory filing, we crack out every key detail out of those documents. And I think we've done a poor job in years past of explaining to the market why do you need all of this data out of these regulatory documents. And it's been my observation that we need to do a better job of educating the market as to why this data is in the public domain, what is this data that's in the public domain, and give you ideas about how you can actually leverage it. So I'm going to start here by just typing in Mewbourne. We've got standardization where I can just click Mewbourne and we should be able to get all the apps and orders filed for Mewbourne. You can see that we've got about 2,200 rows of Mewbourne activity. Excuse me. Nothing like getting interrupted by a cell phone call on a voice recording. We're going to grab Mewbourne because I don't necessarily know everything there is to know about Mewbourne. I haven't been studying them. I just know that they're pretty active out west. I've always admired the company for a number of different reasons, and so I want to determine what I can learn about Mewbourne. I want you to look at this graph here. This is a graph dating back to 2018 and going through just June here of 2023. And this is the spacing and pooling activity across Custer, Dewey, Ellis, and Roger Mills County for Mewbourne, the counties that they are more active in. And I want you to notice here in Ellis County, this slope that's almost, exactly a slope of 1. That's a pretty aggressive slope of activity. And anytime I am thinking about, predicting development, I remember reading, decades ago about momentum trading. And, momentum trading is a strategy that aims to capitalize on the continuance of existing trends in the market. So, momentum traders usually buy or sell an asset, moving intensely in one direction and exiting when this movement shows signs of reversing or cooling off. We do this intuitively. We look at lease activity, we look at pooling activity, we look at permits, we look at completions. And effectively what we're looking for is momentum. We don't want to be the first mover, but we want to be the first, second mover. We want confidence that there is enough activity to suggest that following Mewbourne in Ellis County is a good idea. And you can read about momentum trading. There's a couple of really interesting traders that really embrace the strategy over the last decade. Momentum trading is what it is you want to look up. But using this notion of momentum, I want to drill into this activity in Ellis County further. So I'm going to drop down to the top townships that they've been drilling here. And I want you to notice something. So here we are looking at the township level of activity. And again, it's straight up and right to the right, almost a slope of 1. And this is township 18 North, 24 West. Here's what I don't like about this township. What I don't like about this township is that it started in August of 21 in terms of when the slope started going up and to the right. So that means that all of the activity, the lease activity, the space activity, the pooling activity really started gearing up almost 2 years ago. And I don't think there's a whole lot of money to be made when you're looking back 2 years ago on momentum. So if I'm Wayne Gretzky, I'm asking myself, okay, but where is the puck going? And there's a couple things that stand out to me. If you come down here to these numbers that are not as large in terms of volume yet, but they are trending up and to the right, there's one in particular that sticks out to me, and it's a little bit hard to see. And if you look at this yellow, it's 1724. And it seems to have a pretty aggressive up and to the right, albeit it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months in is 1724. Okay, but still, we're 5 months behind the 8 ball here. What can we do to kind of incrementally get better than looking at 1724? Well, there are 2 things I think we can do to get better. Number 1 is I'm very curious as to what do these document types actually look like in terms of what type of document are these order types or application types. And I'll get back to that in a second. The second thing is let's go look at 1724, where we're seeing this aggressive kind of uptick in activity. And let's see if we can't predict what the next township is going to be outside of 1724. So there are a couple ways that I can do this. The first thing that I would do is I'd go into Atla. This is our flagship product. It's a map-based application to enable you to access our data. And I would draw an area of interest over Ellis County and Roger Mills. Let's go back 2 years and let's grab the spacing data and the permit data over the last 2 years in this AOI. So this is over the last 2 years, and I'm showing a time bar, which is showing the filings over the last 2 years. And so you see 4 Point Unbridled, you see Mewbourne here in purple in Ellis County. And this is just January of 22, this is February 22, March of 22, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November of 22, December of 22, and then we're into this year. And you can see this year, we saw a big spike of application activity by Crawley and Mewbourne here in 1520 and 1521. And we see that they're really kind of filling in Mewbourne, their spacing activity. Remember, we saw 1824 really picking up back in 2021, 3 years ago. And you can see this in the data going back 2 years ago. And remember, we said we're really starting to see a more recent aggressive uptick in 1724. But I'm really kind of interested in this 1521, 1520, and 1723, and I'm actually interested in 1725, and I'm going to tell you why. So first of all, before we get too carried away, let's overlay permit activity. So these triangles are our permits, and those sticks are the laterals, And so again, it's tied to the time bar. So we can see the spacings precede the permits to drill, because you have to have a spacing to file a permit to drill. And so we can see that 1824 is seeing a lot of permit activity, and 1724 is starting to pick up in permit activity, but we're not really seeing any rigs or permits here in 1723, 1521, 1520, or 1725. So how do we predict what's next? How do we either get greater confidence in 1723 to go start putting capital to work to buy in here, or in even 1725, which would be more speculative because there's no spacing activity really here, or in 1521 or 1520? Well, the first thing that I would do is go back to my AOI, and I'm going to kind of capture this area that we're looking at, and I'm going to go back to all time. Now, our spacing data, and I'm going to run a spacing query, goes back to when the OCC was created in the state of Oklahoma. This data, though, is probably going to go back in Western Oklahoma to the 40s. Let's take a look. Okay, so we are looking at just spacing activity going back here. It looks like to 1958. 1958 is the earliest date. And I don't really love that view. So I'm going to quit that application, and I'm going to try again and hopefully edit this out. So I'm going to draw an AOI kind of back over Ellis and Roger Mills County. And this time I'm going to select all time. And I'm going to run a spacing query for all time here. I'm going to go into the data. Give this a second because we're trying to map a very large export here. So I'm going to go into the data, and I'm going to create a condition where I'm going to filter where the formation contains Cherokee. And I'm sure the Cherokee was spelled as many different things over the years. I don't know all the different nomenclature, but let's just go with Cherokee here. And I'm going to map these results. And I'm going to turn off that original spacing query that we asked. Okay. So remember, we were curious about, we said that there's a ton of activity 3 years ago that kicked off in 1824, that 1724 was really emerging here recently. I was curious about 1723, 1521, 1520, and 1725. Why? Well, here we got spacing data. Remember, we filtered the spacing data. We ran a query of all time for all the spacing documents to go back to the inception of spacing in the state of Oklahoma in this AOI, Ellis and Roger Mills County, and we filtered that data back to only those that contain the formation Cherokee. And we're looking at the first filing here in January 17th of 1950. And if we map this, we can see that the first filings here that contain Cherokee are by Thomson Clare, Woods Petroleum, Pan American Petroleum, Union Oil, and Hefner. This is 1969. As we move forward in time, we see 1970, 1974. Well, that's McCullough, that's Wesley, that's McCullough, it's Gomaco, Samadan. This is 1976, Geico, Gomaco, Apexco, Texaco. It's 1978. So what am I getting at? Well, what I'm getting at is we can see in 1520, which is one of the townships I was looking at, Gulf Oil, for example, in 1988, Pennzoil Woods was saying that the Cherokee was prospective. I haven't looked to see what wells they were drilling in here. We know that in 1724, Tenneco, Apexco, I believe I saw, Brock Hydrocarbons, which I believe Brock was, may still be with us, was a phenomenal geologist. Mead, Bracken is who I was thinking of, not Brock, Barth Bracken. 1988, here we are in 1725, where the Cherokee is being listed as prospective in spacings. As I move forward in time, some interesting things happen. We're now in 2000. Now I want you to see there's going to be a dramatic change. You see that dark blue? Who is coming online there? That's EOG. If we pull up one of their spacings, this is 2011, you'll see Cleveland, Marmatie, Cherokee, and Atoka's horizontal, right? So it's not surprising that in the areas where they're already listing Cherokee as being prospective, that's where they're going in and listing horizontal spacings with EOG, that dark blue, really coming on strong in 1824 and 1724. Here we got Bracken, though, in 1725, and Geico. In 1723, we're not seeing a lot yet, even though this is where we're seeing some very recent Mewbourne filings. 1520, we're seeing Cherokee. 1521. As we move forward to present day, we can see that purple is where Mewbourne has come in. Okay, so the thesis that I have is that we saw through some of the trend analysis, we saw that there's a very healthy uptick of activity in terms of momentum in 1824. But what's really starting to come on strong is 1724. It's early, it's 5 months in the making, but it's up and to the right pretty aggressively, right? We also see that historically, 1725, or at least the north half and the very south half, not so much in the middle there, 1724, 1520, historically were spaced Cherokee as being prospective, right? So where do you buy then? Well, let's go back to 2 years of permit activity, and let's look again at where the new permit filings are, and you can see that in the last 2 years, they're very much in 1824, 1723, or 1724, 1824, 1724. Not yet much in 1723. Not much in 1725 yet. Not much in 1520. And let me double check my AOI on this because, okay, hold on. Let's expand that AOI just to make sure. So here are our current spacings, and there's our permit activity. So we do have some permits over here by Duncan in 16, but not in 15, 20, and 15, 21. Okay. So the first thing that I'm looking for when I'm trying to figure out where to go next is I'm looking at the trends in terms of what's turning up and to the right. 1724 is turning up and to the right. 1723, if we look, is not yet statistically significant, but I think it will be because when you look at those filing activities, they are picking up. The other thing that I look at is historically, where have things actually been filed historically, going back to as far back as the regulatory data goes. Where have the Cherokee been spaced historically? The last thing that I would look at in terms of predicting activity is I would be filtering my data down to look at interim spacings. These are spacings that are still filed in advance of a pooling, but that actually have deadlines on them. And so I like these 1523 interim filings by Crawley, for example. Why? Because if we come in here, we look at the actual document, because it's an interim order, what we're going to see is that this case is going to be reopened in November of 23. And they're going to assess at that point. There should be a permit filed before that time. I have to go and read it more carefully if that's actually what I'm reading. But an interim order is for a specific period of time. It's almost like a pooling where you've got to move within that time frame. And so now if I overlay my permit activity, these are all interim orders. And so I would be looking at the dates on those interim orders. And I would also be looking, it's no surprise that of the interim orders that are mapped here, most of them have permits on them. So anyways, we'll be looking at other ideas and tips and strategic thinking in future videos. Hope you enjoy. Thanks.